Welcome back to Bible Talk with Dave and Teresa. Today we are going to discuss Daniel chapter 3 verses 8 through 18, and we're going to dive into actually Daniel's friends with their faith, their discipline, and their loyalty. But first, here's our intro. I'm actually going to read the Christian Standard Bible Version if you'd like to follow along. Some Chaldeans took this occasion to come forward and maliciously accuse the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. You, as king, have issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, drum, and every kind of music must fall down and worship the gold statue. Whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. There are some Jews you have appointed to manage the province of Babylon: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men have ignored you, the king. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." Then in a furious rage, Nebuchadnezzar gave orders to bring in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar asked them, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the gold statue I have set up? Now if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, drum, and every kind of music, fall down and worship the statue I made. But if you don't worship it, you will immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire, and who is the God who can rescue you from my power?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king Nebuchadnezzar, "Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if he does not rescue us, we want you, as king, to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up." Boy, that takes some guts.
Take that, King Nebuchadnezzar.
That takes some real guts to say, "I know you're the king, but you know what? I will not follow your command." The first thing I want you to notice is the Chaldeans took this opportunity. They wanted to be malicious towards the Jews, and specifically towards these three. Because remember, these three were actually in charge of the providence. And because God blessed them, because they were following God, which we saw through Daniel chapter 1 and Daniel chapter 2, they did exactly what God commanded them to do, even through a lot of their hardships that they went through. They never denied God. The Chaldeans were very, I would speculate, very envious. And it's their envy that made them want to become malicious towards them.
Yeah, that's kind of my guess. Is The Bible does not say that. It's very speculative. We don't know how long this takes place after chapter 2, but yeah, my guess is they were butthurt that they were able, the Jews, Daniel and his friends were able to interpret the dream and they couldn't. That's kind of my guess, but it also, we see just the start of thousands and thousands of years of persecution of the Jews too.
Yep.
Because of God.
I know it doesn't say in the Bible because they only said it once where they said their Jewish name, but I'm going to reiterate. Hananiah is the Jewish name for Shadrach, so that's who he is. Mishael is the Jewish name for Meshach, so that's who he is. And Azariah is the Jewish name for Abednego, and that's who he is. So it's I just want to, even though it's not put into the Bible, I think it's good that we understand their Jewish name and not their Babylonian name, because we know that Daniel is Daniel's Jewish name, and that's what we use. We don't call him Balthazar.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to keep in mind that Hananiah is Shadrach, Mishael is Meshach, and Azariah is Abednego. So it's just, I want to put it out there, even though I will probably end up saying Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because that's what we know when we study.
Those are the Babylonian names.
Right, but I do want to put that out there, like, keep this in mind of who they really are. We know that they wanted to get rid of God by changing their names, so we should not forget who they are by allowing us to forget their true names. The other thing I want you to notice is how, like, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they have already decided that they're going to serve our true God even to the death before they even brought to King Nebuchadnezzar. This is a good indication for us to understand the faith, the discipline, and the loyalty. You have to make that decision now, because when you're faced through circumstances, if you don't make that decision now, you're not going to. You'll cave and do what you need to survive. It's a decision that you have to decide, am I willing to lose my life for you? Now, I know my husband and I, we've already made that decision. We're willing to get our head chopped off. We're willing to be tortured. We don't want to be. No.
Yeah, nobody does.
But we're willing to. If that's what's going to bring glory to God, so be it. We serve him and him alone.
You know what? Let's go out and get tortured today. That sounds like fun. Nobody wants that. No. And I'm truly hoping, and we say that now in the comfort of our home, but I'm truly, it's something to pray for. You know, help me be strong in times of turmoil, in times of stress, in times of tribulation. Yep. And I think that God, he will truly take care of his true children, not the lukewarms or the false Christians, but I truly believe he will take care of his children when the time comes in this situation. I want to back up a bit if I can. Okay, I noticed, because we saw that Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage when they didn't worship him. You know, he's all... But he's not completely without logic, because he brings them in and confronts them directly and says, dudes, is this what's really happening? And I also want to point out that Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego don't say God will save us. They don't say that. He can save us. He is able to save us. They're putting their faith, their trust, their hope, and their love into God. Now, they're probably sweating peach pits at this point, because they are literally going to be thrown into a fire. I would be. But ultimately, they're just putting their hope and trust in God, that if God saves them, great. If not, that they did not give up their faith. They did not bow down to the statue. They did not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar. And they died literally holding on to their belief and their faith for God.
And I agree, because I actually, one thing that I was going to get to there, but we'll do that now, is I notice how they say that if our God exists, he can save us. They're not saying that basically if they exist, thinking that, you know, they're not sure if he exists. They know he does. They said that to King Nebuchadnezzar for his benefit, to allow him to see God's glory. They already know that God exists. So much so that they're like, you know what, if God says that he's not going to save us through this fire, when I see him and I get to go to be in his bosom with Abraham, I know I did my part, and I'm not going to go to the pits of hell. Yeah.
Even though we know for a fact, I mean, Nebuchadnezzar just bowed down and worshipped Daniel because of God's ability. Daniel correctly interpreted the dream because God allowed him to.
Yep.
But yet still, it's, hey, King Nebuchadnezzar, if our God exists, and we know he does, by the way, he is able to save us.
The other thing I want you to know is how Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they kept their faith. Again, you're talking about going in front of a king, a very powerful king at that, and a very mean king. History shows us just how mean he was, because before Babylon, he was a part of the Assyrian, because I think that's what his father was. And the Assyrians are very cruel. And the Babylons kind of like eased into it as well. So they're not very nice people, shall we say. You're talking about a king who has a temper, very, very bad temper. Do you know of a good example that we could use?
Yeah, actually it's in the Bible. I'll have to check and correct it later. But I want to say in like 1 Kings, 2 Kings, it talks about the siege of Jerusalem. Didn't Nebuchadnezzar gouge out the eyes of one of the Jewish kings and then drag him off?
Yeah.
Like 900 miles?
Yeah.
Probably in chains and bound,
Yeah.
So no, and we have history. I mean, we have cuneiform tablets. We have, written documents and archaeology from that time about the Babylonian Empire and his reign.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they weren't nice. And they conquered. Nice people don't conquer other people.
No, they don't. That shows, again, like, really truly understand their faith, the faith, the courage, and the discipline, and the loyalty that Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego had to have prior to any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why you have to make that decision now, because remember what they've already gone through. They've gone through being captured. They've gone through being probably tortured, getting through, going from Jerusalem to Babylon. We see it implied that they've probably gone through a castration. So, I mean, I don't know of any man, and I don't know if they really have, like, things that would numb you back then. I'm sure, again, we're talking about cruelty, so it was probably harsh castration. I'm not a man, and I wouldn't want to be during that time, but that would be hard for anybody to go through. And you're seeing how they're still keeping their faith. That has to be a very strong, strong faith.
Oh, yeah.
But that's why you have to always pray, saying, Father, help me through this. Don't let the torture happen. Now, I speculate, this is my speculation, the fact that they've already gone through that, a burning fire furnace is nothing to them. They've already gone through torture. Once you go through torture, death is nothing.
Yeah, but being burned alive is probably one of the worst ways to go.
Well, I don't know. I think, like, suffocation. I think in one of the things that we've seen with, I think it was, this is history. It's not in the Bible, but there was a pastor, or not a pastor, but somebody who, like, supported biblical teachings, and he was thrown into, like, a bowl and suffocated. I forgot his name.
I know it's called the blazing bowl or the braising bowl, where they literally put a person in a brass bowl,
yeah,
and then light a fire,
yeah,
underneath the bowl, and they basically cook to death.
Yeah, I think that's worse than.
Oh yeah.
I think
that's a horrible way to go too.
Yeah. Now this is not a good way to go, but I think the other one would be worse.
Yeah.
Call me a little crazy. I think that's where a lot of claustrophobia would come into play. My Father, just take me now. Let my subconscious take over, and I'm done. It's not a laughing matter, but sometimes that's the only way you can get through, like, these thought processes. Is just kind of like laugh at the scenario. Going, yeah. Okay. You see it, you recognize it, and you just have to trust that God's going to get you through it, as we see Him do. We'll see next week through that, how He does it.
Yep.
Before I go into explaining this, the first thing I want to say is, if what I'm about to say actually makes you angry towards me, it means that you're allowing your flesh to take over instead of asking God for the truth. And I know this because my husband and I actually went through this ourselves. We will do a whole different series on this, but I do want to point this out. I know that a lot of the pre-tribulation individuals use this as their indication, saying that you don't see Daniel. Daniel was already raptured. Therefore, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego were the ones that had to go through the blazing fire. The reason why that's false is because when you look at Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, you're basically trying to say that because Daniel was raptured, they were not true to God. And that's not true. Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego were all loyal to God. We're all doing the same things. So therefore, you can't say that this was pre-trib. It doesn't work that way. You can't say that they were lukewarm Christians. They weren't. They were willing to be burned to death because they were loyal to God. So if you hear someone talk about this proves pre-tribulation, I would ask that you correct them, because that's not true. The other reason why I say that too is because notice how the Chaldeans, they weren't, the other reason why I'm saying that they weren't lukewarm was because the Chaldeans didn't like them. The Chaldeans were maliciously trying to actually attack them.
Yeah.
Lukewarms always try to make peace between They want to claim Christianity, saying I am a Christian, but they try to make peace with the world. And Jesus already told us, you can't serve two gods.
Nope.
Either you love me and people are going to hate you because you love me, or you love the world and therefore you don't love me. That's why lukewarm Christians it's very, very hard to facilitate to a lukewarm Christian. We have family members who are lukewarm Christians, and I want to pull my hair out every single time I talk to them. I understand why the book of Revelation says, I want to spew you out. They don't want to hear what I say in the Bible. Like, whoa. But they want to please the world.
Yep.
The pre-tribulation beliefs are set up, in my personal opinion, but they are set up for to actually have you fail. Because what you're doing is you're allowing yourself an easy route escape instead of actually going into asking God, prepare me for what might happen. That's why even if you want to be pre-trib, I'm not going to, we can still break bread. Don't allow that escape to enter your mind. Keep praying, saying, Father, tell me the truth. Help me to prepare for what may happen. Because remember, Jesus does tell us we will face tribulation. We will face trials. And if we don't ask for that strength, that faith, and that loyalty, and that discipline to do it, we're not going to. We're going to easily give into it thinking, oh, well, I don't have to worry about it because I'm a Christian. So, when we're raptured up, I'm going to go up with God and everybody else is going to be down here. That's false. That's not what he tells us to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get off that tangent now.
Yeah.
But we will go into tribulation speculations later. We're not going to worry. We'll do a whole different series on that one.
Yeah.
We're not going to worry about that right now.
As we're going to see next week, God still, this is a trial and tribulation. You've got 3 of God's servants who are fairly mid-high ranking officials in Nebuchadnezzar's court. They're about to be thrown into a fire for their faith and their belief. So it's kind of like, it's Old Testament. Jesus was, look at Acts. I mean, there's nothing but persecution for Paul and the apostles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying we are going to be persecuted, but even today in modern world, the hundreds of thousands of Christians are being persecuted throughout the world in other countries. So it absolutely does happen.
In North Korea, China. Yeah.
Absolutely happens. And we just need to pray for them and support them the best we can.
And I mean, here in America, we didn't have it nearly as bad, but for the past couple of years prior to the first term of President Trump, Christians were afraid to actually say that they were Christians and really do Christian things. They allowed the churches to be infiltrated, where they started saying, well, you need to do this and this. A good example would be like Joel Osteen. He is, wow. Jesus is a vending machine, and he completely goes against what the Bible says. Everything that he says, it's completely opposite of what the Bible says.
That may be another video altogether.
Yeah, that would be, we'll get into the false teachings. Now, speaking of false teachings, if there's something that we say that is wrong, by all means, correct us, because that's what Christians are supposed to do. We're supposed to correct each other lovingly.
Lovingly. I'm looking at you, right there. Right there.
Not harshly. It's supposed to be lovingly. That's actually one of the commands that actually, and that's how the Bible is supposed to, how it stayed alive for so long, is because that's what's happening, is we're correcting each other, and we see the truth. And the apostles were very, very eminent about how everything was written down. So they're pretty good about that.
Yep.
And of course, granted, God is the one that keeps it alive.
Yeah, just wrapping up, because we've kind of gone.
Yeah, we did a little loop-de-loop.
So we see the astrologers, the magi, whoever, the advisors, the Chaldeans, writing out the Jews. We don't know if they were upset because they interpreted the dream, but we see Nebuchadnezzar's not without reason. He brought in, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego and said, dudes, what's going on? They're like, no, we're not going to bow down to your God. Pray that whatever trials and tribulation God has, and we will go through them. That's how we build faith. Look at the book of James explains that. But yeah, just pray whatever comes our way, Lord, help us through it. And it's like, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You are with me. We are going to go through the valley of the shadow of death. We are going to go through hard times. It's a matter of who you rely on. They are relying on their God. So that's just a good example for us, even in today's society, whether it's financial, business, drugs, alcohol, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever.
Yeah, emotional support. Yeah, all of it. So no, he's absolutely right, and David is right. I know that when we see I fear no evil when I go through the valley of the shadow of the death, we think of at least I do. I don't know about the rest of you, but before I started speaking to David about this, I would think that it was right before I die, I'm about to go through the valley shadow of death, or when I'm in old age, go through that. David is the one that made it known to me, saying, no, it's the trials. Every single trial we go through is the valley of the shadow of death. Who are we reliant on when we go through it? And again, that's husband correcting his wife. There's a reason why the man is supposed to be head of household. Women are emotional, men are logical. So that's it for what we have for Daniel chapter 3, verses 8 through 18. Next week, we're going to go and finish the rest of Daniel chapter 3, where we see the end results of what happens with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you want to see the playlist for what we already have for for Daniel 1 through 3, click here. And until next time, we'll see you next week. You have a blessed day. Bye.
Bye.